The autumn sun filtered through the tall windows of Riverside Elementary, casting gentle shadows across the polished floor. Daniel Morrison stood near the entrance, his weathered hands gripping the strap of his worn leather messenger bag. At 52, he carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who had learned life's harder lessons but refused to let them break him. His steel gray hair was neatly combed, and his flannel shirt was pressed with the careful attention of someone who took pride in the small things. The lines around his eyes spoke of both laughter and sorrow, and today, those eyes held a mixture of nervous anticipation and cautious hope. It was the first day of parent-teacher conferences, and Daniel had arrived early. He always arrived early. Punctuality was one of the many things his late wife Sarah had loved about him. He watched as other parents filtered past, some chatting easily with one another, others buried in their phones. Daniel stood apart, as he so often did these days. Being a single father had made him somewhat of an outsider in the usual parenting circles. Most of the mothers had their groups, their coffee dates, their easy camaraderie. Daniel had his routines, his responsibilities, and the enduring memory of a love that still guided him. His thoughts drifted, as they often did, to Sarah. She had been gone for 3 years now, taken too soon by an illness that moved faster than any of them could comprehend. The tattoo on his forearm, usually hidden beneath his sleeve, was a tribute to her. A delicate compass rose with a small heart at its center. Sarah had gotten a matching one shortly after they married, her way of saying they would always find their way back to each other no matter what. Daniel absently rolled up his sleeve just enough to see the edge of the design. He traced the lines with his finger, remembering. "Excuse me, sir?" The voice was small, tentative. Daniel looked down to find 3 identical faces staring up at him. Triplet girls, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, with bright hazel eyes and matching ponytails tied with yellow ribbons. They were clearly sisters, though each had her own distinct expression. One looked curious, one seemed shy, and the third wore a gentle, knowing smile. "Yes?" Daniel replied, his voice warm despite his surprise. He had always been good with children, even those who weren't his own. The curious one spoke first. "We noticed your arm." The tattoo. Daniel glanced down at his forearm, realizing his sleeve had rolled up further than he intended. He started to pull it down, but something in the girls' faces stopped him. The shy one took a small step forward. "Our mother," she said quietly, "has a tattoo just like yours." Daniel froze. Time seemed to slow. The bustling sounds of the hallway faded into a distant hum. His heart, which had been beating its steady, predictable rhythm, now hammered against his ribs with an urgency he hadn't felt in years. "What did you say?" he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. The third girl, the one with the knowing smile, spoke with a clarity that seemed beyond her years. "Our mom's tattoo. It's the same as yours, a compass with a heart. She told us it was very special to her." Daniel's legs felt weak. He steadied himself against the wall, his mind racing through impossible possibilities. Could it be, after all these years? No, it couldn't. Sarah was gone. He had stood at her funeral, had held their daughter Emma through those first awful nights, had learned to live in a world without her light. But the compass rose wasn't a common design. He and Sarah had worked with a local artist to create something unique, something that belonged only to them. "Your mother," Daniel said slowly, carefully. "What's her name?" The girls exchanged glances. The curious one answered. "Mama Elena, she works at the hospital. She's a nurse." "Not Sarah, of course not. Sarah." Daniel felt a confusing mixture of relief and disappointment wash over him. He took a breath, trying to steady himself, trying to understand what this meant. "Elena," he repeated softly. "And where is your mother now?" "She's in the parking lot," the shy one said. "She was looking for a parking spot. She told us to come inside and wait by the door." The knowing one touched Daniel's hand gently. "You look sad, sir. Did we upset you?" Daniel looked down at the small hand resting on his own, and something in his chest loosened. He knelt down, bringing himself to their eye level. "No, sweetheart, you didn't upset me. You just reminded me of someone very special, someone I lost." The 3 girls surrounded him with an instinctive kindness that children sometimes possess. They didn't speak, didn't ask questions. They simply stood close, offering the silent comfort of their presence. "My wife," Daniel continued. his voice thick with emotion. Had a tattoo like this too. Just like the one your mother has. She passed away 3 years ago. We're sorry, the curious one said, and her sisters nodded solemnly. Thank you, Daniel replied. He pulled his sleeve back down and stood, his composure returning. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. The same design, I mean. But I'd like to meet your mother if that's all right. Just to see. Before the girls could respond, a woman's voice called out from the entrance. Lily, Grace, Sophie! There you are. I told you to wait right by the door. Daniel turned, and for the second time in as many minutes, the world seemed to tilt beneath him. The woman walking toward them was in her late 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that sparkled, with warmth and intelligence. She wore scrubs under a light jacket, clearly having come straight from work. She was beautiful in an understated way, the kind of beauty that came from years of kindness and compassion rather than careful attention to appearance. But it wasn't her face that made Daniel's breath catch. It was her forearm, visible as she gestured to her daughters, where an identical compass rose tattoo marked her skin. Elena reached her daughters and immediately began checking them over with the practiced efficiency of a mother and a medical professional. You three are going to give me gray hair before I'm 50, she said, though her tone was affectionate. I can't leave you alone for 2 minutes without you wandering off. We didn't wander, Mama, Lily, the curious one, protested. We were right here, and we met this nice man. He has a tattoo just like yours. Elena's hand stilled. She looked up, her eyes meeting Daniel's for the first time. In that instant, something passed between them. Some current of recognition that neither could explain. Hello, Elena said, her voice slightly breathless. I'm Elena Rodriguez. Daniel Morrison, he replied, extending his hand. When their fingers touched, he felt it again, that inexplicable sense of connection. Your daughters tell me you have a compass tattoo. Elena's free hand moved instinctively to her forearm, covering the design as if protecting it. I do. It's a long story. I'd like to hear it, Daniel said gently. If you don't mind. You see, I have the same tattoo, and the story behind it is very special to me. Elena studied his face, and Daniel had the sense that she was seeing past his words, reading the grief and hope and confusion written in his features. Finally, she nodded. The girls have their conference in 20 minutes. There's a coffee shop across the street. Maybe we could talk? Just for a few minutes? Mama, we can go with Miss Henderson by ourselves. Grace, the shy one, offered. We're big girls. We'll be very good, Sophie added. We promise. Elena looked uncertain, but Daniel smiled at the triplets. Your daughters seem very responsible, and I'd really appreciate the chance to talk with you. Something in his voice must have convinced her. Elena checked her watch, then looked at her girls. All right, but you go straight to Miss Henderson's classroom and you wait for me there. No exploring, no detours. Yes, Mama, they chorused. As the girls scampered off down the hallway, Daniel and Elena walked in silence toward the exit. The autumn air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. They crossed the street to a small cafe with large windows and comfortable chairs. Inside, the warmth enveloped them. Daniel ordered 2 coffees while Elena found a quiet corner table. When he joined her, she had rolled up her sleeve, revealing the full tattoo. It was identical to his. Every line, every detail, every subtle shading. Even the small heart at the compass's center was the same. How is this possible? Elena whispered, her fingers tracing the design. I had this done 15 years ago from a sketch I drew myself. I've never seen another one like it. Daniel slowly rolled up his own sleeve, placing his forearm next to hers on the table. The similarity was unmistakable, undeniable. My wife and I got these 23 years ago, he said quietly. We designed them together with a local artist. A compass to always find our way back to each other. With a heart to show that love was our true north. Elena's eyes glistened with sudden tears. That's exactly what mine means. I wasn't married when I got this. I was a single mother, pregnant with the triplets, and I was so scared, so lost. I sketched this design one night when I couldn't sleep, thinking about how I needed to find my way, how I needed to be strong enough for 3 little lives depending on me. You drew it yourself? Daniel asked, his mind struggling to comprehend. You didn't use an existing design? Didn't copy it from somewhere? No, Elena insisted. It came from here. She touched her heart. I can't explain it. I was just drawing, letting my hand move, and this is what appeared on the paper. My tattoo artist was amazed by how detailed and meaningful it was. They sat in silence, both staring at their matching tattoos, both grappling with the impossibility of it all. My wife's name was Sarah, Daniel finally said. She died 3 years ago, cancer. It happened so fast. One day she was healthy, full of life and plans, and 6 months later she was gone. I'm so sorry, Elena whispered. She reached across the table, her hand covering his. That must have been unbearable. It was, Daniel admitted. It still is some days. But I had to keep going. For our daughter, Emma. She was 15 when Sarah died. She needed me to be strong. Elena nodded. I understand. When I found out I was having triplets, their father left. Just walked away. Said he wasn't ready to be a parent to one child, let alone 3. I was devastated. But I looked at those ultrasound pictures, at those 3 little heartbeats, and I knew I had to find my strength. I had to be both parents for them. You've done an incredible job, Daniel said sincerely. They're wonderful girls. Polite, kind, thoughtful. That doesn't happen by accident. Elena smiled, a blush coloring her cheeks. Thank you. They're my whole world. Every sacrifice, every difficult day, every moment of doubt. They've made it all worthwhile. I know what you mean, Daniel replied. Emma is 17 now, preparing for college. Watching her grow into this strong, compassionate young woman has been the greatest privilege of my life. They talked for another 10 minutes, the conversation flowing easily despite the strangeness of their meeting. Elena told him about her work at the hospital, about the long hours and the emotional toll, but also the profound satisfaction of helping people. Daniel shared stories about his job as a carpenter, about the joy of building things with his hands, of creating something lasting and beautiful from raw materials. When Elena checked her watch and realized they needed to get back, neither of them wanted to leave. This is going to sound strange, Elena said as they walked back toward the school. But I feel like I've known you longer than 20 minutes. I feel it too, Daniel admitted. I don't understand it. I don't understand any of this, but I'd like to see you again, if you're willing. Elena stopped walking. She turned to face him, her expression serious. Daniel, I need to be honest with you. I haven't dated anyone since the girl's father left. I've focused entirely on being a mother, on building a stable life for them. I'm not sure I even know how to do this anymore. I haven't dated either, Daniel said. After Sarah died, I couldn't imagine being with anyone else. Part of me still can't. But standing here with you, looking at these tattoos, feeling this connection, I think maybe the universe is trying to tell us something. Or maybe, Elena said softly, 2 people who have experienced loss and learned to be strong are finally ready to not be quite so alone anymore. Daniel smiled, and for the first time in 3 years, it felt completely genuine. Maybe that's it. They exchanged phone numbers, promising to stay in touch. As they re-entered the school, the triplets came running down the hallway, their faces bright with excitement. Mama, Miss Henderson said we're doing great in reading, Lily announced. And we got gold stars for our math work, Grace added. Sophie, however, looked directly at Daniel. Are you going to be our friend now? She asked with the directness only a child could manage. Elena started to apologize, but Daniel laughed. I hope so, he told Sophie. I'd like to be friends with all of you. Good, Sophie said decisively. You seem like you need friends. Sophie! Elena gasped, mortified. But Daniel just knelt down and looked Sophie in the eye. You're absolutely right, he told her. I do need friends. Thank you for seeing that. Later that evening, after the conferences were done and the girls were home doing homework, Elena sat in her small kitchen staring at her forearm. She had looked at this tattoo thousands of times over the years. It had been her anchor, her reminder that she could navigate any storm, that she was never truly lost as long as she followed her heart. But now it meant something more, something she couldn't quite name yet. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Daniel. I wanted to make sure I had the right number, and I wanted to say thank you. For today, for listening, for understanding. Elena smiled and typed back. I should thank you too. Today was unexpected in the best possible way. Would you like to have coffee again? This time without a time limit? Elena paused, her thumb hovering over the screen. She thought about the years of loneliness, of being strong for everyone but herself. She thought about her daughters and how they deserved to see their mother happy, not just dutiful. And she thought about the impossible coincidence of two identical tattoos, drawn years apart, bringing two people together who understood loss and resilience and hope. "I'd like that very much," she typed. Over the next few weeks, Daniel and Elena met for coffee, then dinner, then walks in the park. They talked about everything and nothing, discovering shared interests and complementary differences. They laughed more than either had in years. They also cried together, sharing their grief in a way that didn't diminish it, but somehow made it more bearable. Emma met the triplets and immediately adored them, becoming a willing babysitter and honorary big sister. The girls, in turn, looked up to Emma with an awe that made her feel valued and important. Daniel met Elena's parents, who welcomed him with open arms, grateful to see their daughter smile again. Elena met Daniel's late wife's parents, who gave their blessing, saying that Sarah would have wanted Daniel to find happiness again. 3 months after their first meeting, Daniel and Elena stood together at the cemetery where Sarah was buried. Elena held his hand as he knelt and placed fresh flowers on the grave. "Sarah," Daniel said quietly, "I want you to meet someone. Her name is Elena. She's special. I think you'd like her. I think you'd approve." Elena knelt beside him, her own eyes filled with tears. "I promise to honor your memory," she whispered. "To never try to replace you. To love him in my own way, while respecting the love you shared." As they stood to leave, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm light across the cemetery. Daniel looked at Elena, at this woman who had somehow come into his life bearing the same mark, the same symbol of finding one's way home. "Do you believe in signs?" he asked. Elena looked down at their matching tattoos, then back up at his face. "I do now," she said. A year later, Daniel and Elena stood before their families and friends, exchanging vows in a simple ceremony in Elena's backyard. The triplets served as flower girls, and Emma stood as Daniel's best woman. Both Daniel and Elena wore short sleeves, their matching tattoos visible to everyone present. During the reception, Daniel's father-in-law, Sarah's father, approached Elena. He was a tall man with silver hair and kind eyes, much like his daughters had been. "I want you to know something," he told Elena. "When Sarah was dying, she made Daniel promise that he would eventually let himself love again. She said life was too short and too precious to spend it alone. She wanted him to find someone who would bring him joy." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for telling me that. And I want you to know,